Okay, hi. I think we're going to get started because I was just mentioning for those who were not on earlier, I really only have about 20 minutes, I think, because folks will start popping on for the board meeting at 6, just a few minutes early, and it would be good to have a couple minutes to take a break as well in between. So I'm going to get started. Um, and I will, unless there's something super burning, I'll ask that everyone just kind of wait if there's a question or comment to the end. That way I can get through the content and we can go from there. Certainly feel free to raise your hand if it can't wait. So thank you for coming and welcome. This is just a training on our board and committee member handbook and code of conduct. So this is a fairly new document. Some of you have seen it before. Some of you have voted on it. It was adopted in March of this year. So definitely fairly new, and we wanted to just provide an opportunity to share some of these changes and updates that were made in this latest iteration. So the agenda for today is really just based on the actual table of contents of this document. So there's a bunch of stuff that's really more of what is the CCRPC, who are we, what do we do in the first part, and that's really more of the handbook. So we're going to go over that really briefly, but I do want to save some of that because I do believe that we're going to have a sort of a CCRPC 101 training, I believe in September, and that's going to go into some of that in more detail. So today, mostly I'm going to be talking about the code of conduct and the code of conduct implementation. So just getting started here, what is the handbook and the code of conduct? So this is a resource for current, new, and prospective board and committee members. And it's also pretty helpful for all of those interested in our work within the community. It's an outline of our organizational role and structure. And it really clearly outlines board and committee member roles and expectations as well. And there are a ton of linked resources for further review just throughout the whole document, where you can dig in and learn more. The handbook was last updated over 10 years ago, so this definitely is a modernized view. It includes the most current information, and there was a code of conduct in that previous version, but this is definitely a more robust code of conduct, and it's modeled after the staff code of conduct, which had its own sort of process. It's definitely pared down, but it is modeled after that. So it was updated by CCRPC staff throughout 2024 and 2025 with a lot of board input throughout. And it was adopted, as I mentioned, by the board in March of this year. So I'm going to go through these slides fairly quickly. These are just sort of that overview thing I was talking about. So who are we? What do we do? What are our key focus areas? So there's a bunch of graphics throughout this. And the handbook itself is only about 9 pages, so nothing too challenging, but a link to our 50-year timeline as well, so you can see the history of our work in our communities. And the handbook includes our core values, our purpose, and our equity commitment, which was also adopted by the board in September of last year. So these just list them as bullets, but there's much more information in the document where you can kind of dig into those core values, what they mean, how we're implementing them, as well as the purpose, and the actual equity commitment is listed in there as well. We do dive into the organization structure. Again, I'll sort of save some of this for the next training, but who are we? Who are our municipal or voting representatives? How are they appointed? I'm going to skip through this really quickly, but you can see all of our municipalities listed there. And then other representatives, so those who are non-voting, those who vote on RPC business only, and then those who vote on MPO business only, and who appoints those as well. So all this information, kind of a one-stop shop in this handbook, which can be pretty helpful, especially for new members. And from there, we also have an organization chart that we update pretty regularly as our company hire new people or our priorities shift. So that's always available, and I have that on the next slide. In the document, we talk about all of our committees. We have many standing committees. They all have different charges. And we do encourage board members to participate in one of our committees, at least one. I know many of you do that, which is wonderful. And so on each, these are links in the document, as pretty much everything is, like I mentioned. And so you can learn more about these committees and their work that they're doing in our communities as well, if you're interested in serving on one of these. And this is just an image of that organization chart I mentioned. So we have this always available on our website. I put the link on the bottom here. on our staff page, and this kind of clearly outlines the flow of work in our organization. And this is a super great section for members to review. I'm not going to go in detail because it would take up the whole time, but the handbook itself outlines the board member roles and responsibilities. So these are those nine, this is basically an outline, and then under each one of these, it really clarifies what we mean by that. So more details are available in the full document. I would strongly encourage you to look through this, ask questions. If something isn't clear, we would love to hear about it. If you have questions, if you have comments, want to learn more, definitely dig into this section and certainly reach out. And I just put a little screenshot in here to overwhelm you with text, but just to show you that each one of these does have its own sub bullets where we try to get really clear about what we mean in terms of roles and responsibilities. Okay, so I sort of blasted through that first section. We can always pause and go back to it as needed, but I wanted to dig into the code of conduct a bit. This code of conduct, as I mentioned, was part of the previous board handbook that I'm talking 10 years ago now, but it has been refreshed and really fleshed out a lot. So there's a lot of new content in here. And it's really divided into two parts, right? So there's the code of conduct itself, and then there's actually the implementation of the code of conduct. So how, rather than just having a stationary PDF on the website, which we do have, how are we actually implementing this so that it shows up in our work as a board, as an organization, as a staff? So there's those two parts. And this is under the board and committee member expectations, the code of conduct, and we try to define it. So it's a set of guidelines. The code of conduct itself is a set of guidelines intended to reflect and cultivate our organizational values, our equity commitment, our mission, and our vision. We acknowledge that must be actively practiced by all CCRPC representatives and staff, and that it will continue to evolve as we receive feedback and we learn and we kind of, because this document is not, it's definitely something that can be edited and updated as needed. So the code of conduct itself includes these 7 sections, and I'll walk through each one of them briefly. So the first one is group expectations. And this is pretty new. And some of you have, especially those who voted on this a few months ago, have some experience with this. So this is definitely something that's new to our organization that we're trying to implement both on a organizational level and in public meetings. So these are just expectations that are not final. They're intended to be a draft and edited frequently or as it makes sense. And it's just designed to share some expectations, typically at the beginning of a meeting or at the beginning of a conversation, potentially later at board meetings. And when I mean shared, it could be shared as a slide, it could be shared in the chat, it could be talked about. And this is just to sort of ground everybody in the goals of the meeting, to make sure that everybody has enough space to talk, to listen to each other. Again, these are just drafts, so they're definitely not final. And they have been edited a lot by staff, and they're edited depending on the meeting that you're involved in. And I'm just going to give a little example of what that looks like. This is a presentation slide that we used at the beginning of focus groups that we had for Act 181. And just to kind of get everyone on the same page before you dive into some conversations. The second section is just public meeting expectations in Vermont's open meeting law. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. It just outlines, we have a lot of resources that we've created on the open meeting law. We talk about how the expectation that all CCRPC meetings will be recorded and publicized. We talk a little bit about how CCRPC is a drug and smoke-free environment, dress code when representing CCRPC. We don't have a formal dress code. There's more information about what we mean by that in there, just that you're, representing CCRPC, that you're regularly interacting with each other and the public, whether that's in person or virtual or some hybrid situation. And this section also dives into meeting attendance and preparedness and what that means. So attendance is a key component of effective collaboration here at CCRPC. We ask that you members attend regularly and to definitely work with your appointed alternate when you're unable to attend. Of course, that being said, we're all humans with robust lives outside of this volunteer work, and so we certainly understand when folks aren't able to make it. Um, it also outlines our commitment as staff in terms of providing meeting materials to you in advance. Um, we strive for 5 to 7 days, especially for the agendas and packets. I think the open meeting law requires 48 hours, but a lot of our materials are more robust and definitely require a little bit more time. And then we just ask that members come prepared by reviewing those in advance. And there's a little just graphic there from the actual document, just talking about the time commitment. And this dives more into communication and expectations surrounding communicating with your community and your local legislative body as needed. Um, there's a section on conflict of interest, which really just refers you to the bylaws where that the conflict of interest policy is really clearly laid out. Again, lots of links. So and it also includes a partisan and nonpartisan political activity section. I would definitely encourage you to look through that. I haven't outlined it all here, but it's definitely really clearly spelled out in this code of conduct. So just defining what we mean by partisan political activity and just making it clear that board and committee members may not participate in partisan political activity while representing CCRPC, but that not all political activity is partisan and members can certainly participate on their own time. So there's just, it is all spelled out pretty neatly in the code of conduct. So I definitely encourage you to look into that and definitely let us know if you have any questions. And lastly, I believe in this section, there's, and I think that this was pretty much pulled from the last handbook, a section on harassment and discrimination, defining what we mean by that and how we would handle that if it did come up. And then jumping really quickly, I'm moving fast here, but jumping quickly to the implementation part of this, right? So all board and committee members are responsible for the implementation of the code of conduct. And we have this section kind of spelled out in 5 different bullets, which I'll walk through to help us kind of keep us on track, make sure that there's time for reflection, for feedback in this progress or in this process, and that we're making progress in upholding and actualizing the code. So the first piece of this, and some of you have heard me sort of tease this, is the signed acknowledgement of review and receipt of this policy, which is new. You have not received it yet, so you're not missing anything. But part of the process is that we will ask board members and alternates to sign an acknowledgement of receiving it and that they've read it. And I actually have a form that's ready to go. So at some point this month, pretty soon, I'm going to be emailing that to folks just saying, here's the document and here's just a little form to acknowledge that you received it, you read it. And certainly at any point, you can follow up with questions. And then beginning next fiscal year, we want to integrate this into the appointment process just to streamline it a bit. The onboarding and orientation piece is really our responsibility to make sure that new members have what they need, and that whether it's the executive director or other appropriate staff is meeting with a board member when they come on to make sure that they're oriented, not just with the code of conduct, with a whole host of other things that you'll be involved in as a board member or alternate, and just really emphasizing feedback as something that is incredibly important in the role of members and staff and just having everybody on the same page. That's something that we haven't really been doing in terms of surveys and follow-ups. And that's a commitment that we're making as staff to make sure that there's at least annually opportunities to provide feedback, how your experience is as a member, what else do you need from us, from each other, to be an effective board member. Part of this is education and training. You are here, so thank you for being here. Continuous learning is essential to our ability to uphold the code of conduct and to our ability to serve as members and staff as well. And so we may periodically ask that you participate in a training such as this. And There is a big section here on conflict resolution. I do not have it all outlined in this presentation, but I would definitely encourage you to look at that. This conflict itself can mean all sorts of things, different things to people. And so we don't have one specific definition of conflict. People handle conflict differently. Some people welcome it, some people really shy away from it. And I think that one of the things that we tried to do in this document and in our work is just acknowledge that conflict is not inherently bad. It is something that is to be expected in the work that we're doing. You know, when we were talking about things like transportation planning, how land is being used in the future, like these are things that conflict is to be expected. And so I think acknowledging that most conflicts that we experience, whether as staff or with board members or whoever, can be resolved fairly simply through informal conversation, direct dialogue, apologies, that sort of thing. Um, but for things that may fall outside of that, we do have really clearly outlined processes. I'll talk a little bit about it, but there's an appendix to this that kind of really clearly outlines it. So definitely encourage you to read the full thing to get a sense for that. One of the processes is restorative, and the other is more of a formal process. And again, just getting really clear about if something were to happen where you needed to talk to somebody, um, we have a really clear process who to report to. Right? Taking it very seriously, making sure that everyone has what they need, that there are no questions. It's just very clearly spelled out. And again, this is just a little graphic from the actual document, way more information in it. So again, just those two processes, restorative and formal, outlined here. And lastly, resources. Again, so many resources linked throughout. There's a whole section at the end of the actual handbook and code of conduct. We strongly encourage you to read this, ask questions. I'm sure that there will be questions. This is, like I said, a fairly new document. And so, but it really is intended to be helpful. And so if, you know, certainly if anything is left out, if you're still having questions after reading some of these sections we talked about, and I encouraged you to look into deeper, please let us know because we really want this to be, you know, a lot of time went into this. We really want this to be helpful and useful, you know, for new members, but also for folks who have been here for a while, you know, and might need a refresher on something. We want it to be clearly spelled out. Um, that's all I have. So I'm going to pause. I did put a link right here to where you can see the full handbook. And I'll probably send that out again as well. I know I've sent it a couple times now, but just it'll go out with that sort of acknowledgement form. And so we'll have an opportunity to read that again, review it, and sign that in the coming month or two. And I'm going to stop sharing. And we have a couple minutes, and I'm so sorry because I know that that was a lot just kind of thrown at you, but it's really truly only a, you know, a 9 or so page document. And so definitely encourage you to read that and reach out with any questions. But I will just ask if anyone has anything that we can answer now, I would welcome that too. Garrett.
This has been great. Thank you very much for this. It should be required for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, I understand you want to do voluntary, but and that's always nice, but I don't see a ton of current board members here, and I think there are everybody could gain from this and maybe even a little more detail. So just wanted to toss that out as a thought.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, and I did, Emma, I did post a couple links to the handbook and to the
Great.
kind of commissioner alternate page where there's a lot of other resources also. And my third comment, I think I put it in the chat, was let us know if you have any comments, either in the chat
Yeah.
or you want to email us separately. Happy to hear that. Jeff.
Well, Garrett, thanks for that. This has been a pet project of mine in terms of trying to make sure that we offer this but I think it's really important now because we have so many new members.
Mhm.
And I think the other thing that I'm pushing for, and I don't know if I've been successful yet, is I think that we should get together in person at least quarterly. Okay. Now I realize we get together at the legislative breakfast and things like that, but there's so many of us that are new. Um, and I've been here for almost 25 years, and there are members now of this board that I've never met in person. And while it's great to see everybody from the neck up, um, it's difficult to have rapport with people that you haven't met personally. So the first couple of years after the pandemic, it was kind of okay because we didn't have that much board turnover. But now we've had a significant amount of board turnover. So I think that's really important. So I assume, Charlie, that September's meeting is going to be in Poison.
That is the plan.
And just so everybody knows that my annual consumption of pizza goes way down when we don't get together. And I'd like to get back on that, climb back up on that ship.
Thank you, Jeff. Ben was next.
Yeah, I also appreciate the training and any training. One thing I do and I wanted to do with this is to make sure that the members of our select board actually also take a look at this, and certainly the resources and the links, so that they're more conversant and understand really the relationships that municipalities have with the CCRPC. I think it's a lot of people just aren't aware, and it's important that they also feel comfortable with terminology and with the various projects that are going on. I think there's a lot of room for education there, and I think it's very important. Thank you.
Thanks,
That's why
Ben.
it's so great that we're recording it. So people don't necessarily have to come at 5:30 when we do it, but having a recording of it, I think is helpful. You can sit there with a martini or a beer and look at it.
Thank you. Catherine?
Yeah, it's hard. I concur with the comments that have already been made, how important this kind of training is, based on that it is a brand new handbook with the code of conduct. And I was going through all this stuff again, and as part of the old board development committee, and we talk about RPC 101, you're talking about organization and stuff. I thought, it's actually important to actually go through some of the bylaws and talk about what's in the bylaws themselves as well, because we never have done that as a bylaw presentation. It's been just either MPO or RPC or some of the 101s. And so I thought, oh yeah, we really should also talk about bylaws, much like you've just talked about these.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. We can definitely do that. Great. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Excellent. Well, we'll post a recording of this. I know Town Meeting TV is here, which we greatly appreciate, and making a separate recording of this and then the board meeting. So we'll have those up. And certainly, watch for that email from me with the full link to that, as well as that form. And we've captured all these comments as well, which are great. And so stay tuned. We'll definitely reach out again soon. But really super appreciate you all being here today and taking the time to learn about it.